What if the box you've spent your life trying to escape was never meant to define you in the first place? In this episode, I sit down with Shari Leid, former trial attorney turned connection coach and author, to talk about belonging, flipping the script on our life stories, and how one cardboard box became a platform for transformation. If you've ever felt stuck in a good life while yearning for something great, this conversation is for you. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan Peters, psychologist and executive coach. This show is all about bringing hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom through meaningful conversations that inspire us to be better versions of ourselves and have a positive impact on humanity. This is your space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with who you are, what you care about, and who you want to be. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Shari Leid. Shari is the founder of An Imperfectly Perfect Life, where she specializes in guiding clients who feel trapped in stagnation, empowering them to sculpt the life of their dreams. Renowned as a friendship expert and national speaker, Shari's insights reach far beyond individual coaching sessions, as she's been interviewed on major networks, including ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, and was profiled on the Today Show. She is the author of the Friendship series, which includes 3 books, The 50-50 Friendship Flow, Make Your Mess Your Message, and Ask Yourself This. And she is the author of her new book, Table for 51, Lessons Learned from Sharing Meals Across America. Shari, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That was a mouthful, that introduction. I appreciate it.
It is. And I didn't even talk about your prior career as a trial attorney. We left
Yes.
that one all the way out. And so I thought we'd start there. What's the path from trial attorney to relationship expert, connection, and life coach? Of course, and
Well,
author on top of that.
y-
Yeah.
well, it feels like a lifetime ago when I practiced law. I practiced law for about 15 years actively as a litigator. And I almost feel like this was back when the law was like 10 commandments. I mean, that's how long ago it was. But I
Mm.
have 2 kids that are now in their 20s, and I stayed home with them for a while. So when it came time for me to, when I became less busy, I should say, with them, I decided, what do I want to do? And I had the luxury of figuring it out because at that time I was married, and so my income, since I wasn't bringing one in, wasn't a factor. So I could actually choose what gave me excitement and passion. And I fell into writing, and from that, everything else has just followed.
And you do have a very powerful, meaningful drive that is behind the work that you do. And before we talk about, well, I would say your origin story, which is really your origin story, about coming into this life, I'm wondering what would you say was that drive? Like, what were you seeking when you had the gift of choosing what your next purpose was?
Well, that's a good word for it, purpose, because that's so hard to figure out. What I work with now is helping people stop living someone else's story. So many times we're living a story that someone else gave us. And that's what I need to find. What was my own story? And it happened kind
Mm.
of by accident. Before my 50th birthday, I decided to sit down with 50 women in my life just to tell them what I've learned from them. Some of them were old acquaintances, some of them were new friends. And from that, people, because I'm an oversharer on social media, people got interested, and that organically became my first book.
Hmm. So that was your first book, which then, of course, we will talk about your latest book, um, which also led you to share and to travel and to connect and to belong. And your journey is one of belonging. Like, your journey is one of but I guess what I want to ask is, when did you consciously realize the power for belonging and connection, and how that
Mm,
was driving you?
yeah, well, I searched for belonging my entire life, and this became a revelation for me when I traveled across the US for this last book, Table for 51. Well, the travels became a book, I should say. And I sat down with strangers and I found, just to have organic conversations like we're having now, but I found the one question that I kept on asking was, where feels like home? And I realized at that point, and I knew I'd been searching, I had this feeling throughout my life, but I realized I had been searching for belonging my entire life. And I became an attorney, like you mentioned, and a mom, and now a speaker writer. So from the outside, it looked like I had it all, like I had everything together. But inside, I was always searching for this place to belong.
Hmm. And one of your patented approaches is flipping the box.
Mhm.
And I had read about that before I listened to your story on the TED Talk. And so I was like, oh, this is really interesting, this flipping the box, changing narratives. And then hearing your story, it just becomes even more powerful of what flipping the box really means for you and how you bring this to the world for others. So please tell everyone your story of the box.
Sure. So I was orphaned in Seoul, South Korea. And in my teenage age years, I was given my adoption paperwork. I'd always known I was adopted, but I had not known that until I read the paperwork that I was actually found in a cardboard box in a parking lot with no identifying information, no name, no birth date, nothing. So even the birth date that I was raised with, which I thought was mine, is not mine. I don't know my own birth date. And so this box, from the time I learned about this was my junior year of high school, it became my invisible companion. And it was a symbol that told me, you don't belong, you're not connected to anyone. And it followed me like a shadow. And it wasn't until I traveled across the US, sat down, I had a meal with a stranger in every state, that when I was writing this book, what I realized is, in this process, I had taken this cardboard box and symbolically flipped it, and it became my table for connection and communion and belonging. And so that's where the terminology flip the box comes from. And as I traveled, I realized as I looked around that this isn't just my story. The search for belonging and connection, it's everywhere. It's in our neighborhoods, our communities, it's at epidemic levels in our country. So now I go around and speak and train about flipping the box. What box are you stuck in?
Hmm. And like you said, I mean, it's resonant for all of us, because regardless of where we came from and how we came to be, we're all put in a box, right? I feel like society, culture, geography, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, like name it, it everyone is in some sort of box, and it takes a while for us to realize that it actually is a box with all of the programming that we get, whether through schools, right? And it's just like,
Mhm.
it just doesn't stop at what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to believe. And your story is one of, I mean, it's one of inspiration to show all of us, in your 50s, you've been on this search, you've been on this journey, and we all continue to hopefully learn about ourselves as we go, but we never stop learning, we never stop growing, and finding it sort of to say, like, it could be right around the corner, and we don't know when, and we don't know how it will take form.
Exactly, and so often, and I did this, so often we let our good lives prevent us from having great lives. And, because we have these good lives. And we know a lot of times that there's something more for us. But because our lives are so good, we stay in that box, right? And instead of
Hmm.
flipping it to something that might be new and at first scary, but a lot of times that's what leads us to our great lives and what we're here to do.
Hmm. It makes me think of the work of Gay Hendricks, who has great books. And he talks about this a little different terminology, but he talks about how a lot of times we get stuck in our zone of greatness and don't
Mm.
step out into our zone of genius, which your version is going from good to great. And it is easy for us to be like, well, I'm comfortable and things are working out. And this is everything that I wanted on paper. And this is what I'm supposed to be doing, so, I should just be grateful for what I have. And so, say a little bit about, because I think for people listening, some people might be saying, well, gosh, I would like to have a good life, like got a great
Yeah.
life. Everyone is in so many different places in their journey. I'm just curious of your, what for you distinguishes a good life, or I'll say it this way, a great life from a good life.
The distinguishing factor for me is the way it feels inside. A good life could be something that you look at kind of from the outside. Or a lot of times when we're in a good life, meaning that maybe we have a job, we have a roof over our heads, we don't have to worry about food coming into our home. We have bills to pay like everyone, but we're paying them. It's a good life. Our kids are healthy, we're healthy, whatever it is. But a great life is is when you wake up and maybe you have a little less, but you feel so in line with what you're doing that day, and it's a feeling inside that you know that you are adding value to this world. And I strongly believe that every one of us, just like when I went on this journey, people always ask me, what was your favorite state? Who was your favorite person that you met? And I can't pick one person because the experience would have been different if even just one person was changed from this group of 50 that I met with, and or the places. If I went somewhere else, the whole experience would have changed. It's collective. And I strongly believe every one of us makes such a difference, and we're here to make a difference. And the more we embrace that and become great mean who we were here to be, uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's a great life when we're here adding value, the value that we were given to add to this world.
That really resonates. And I really like what you said about maybe you have less, right? Because we get so caught up in the stuff and the consumerism and the acquiring um, of the goods and the cars and the house and whatever it is that's important to each person on the material plane. And what you're talking about is great, is living aligned and authentic and stepping into your purpose, like really what drives you. It doesn't have to do with any of the material.
Yeah, and I always like to say embrace your weird. The root of the word
Mm.
weird is spelled WYRD, and the meaning is fate or destiny. And I think
Ooh.
oftentimes when we live our good life, we're not really embracing our weird. We're not allowing ourselves to be comfortable showing our uniqueness, which really is our gifts and what makes us different and where we add value. So I always tell people embrace your weird and watch the world open up to you.
Embrace your weird. Okay, I did not know about that spelling
Yeah,
and
look it
definition
up.
of weird. I like that. I like that. And this makes me think of, so everyone, think about the person or the small group of people who you feel you can be yourself around. You don't have to think, you don't have to censor, you can be quirky, you can be funny, you can drop your F bombs, you could do whatever, you dress the way you want. You're just you. And I think, Sherry, what we're talking about is how you could be that in the world, like how to open yourself up to have the courage, because it does take courage to truly be you in this world with all of the critiques and the social media and the judgments and all the other human nature stuff. But wow, how freeing. And I think this is like what you've been experiencing over these last few years with your transitions, is like
Mm.
how to fully step into being you, including on a stage, right? In front of
Yes.
hundreds and thousands of people out there, being you.
And I think we owe it to the next generation to show them not only how to be ourselves and being comfortable with it, because it's hard. They're growing up where if they make a mistake, it's not just the person in the room that sees it. It, it goes out, it's memorialized on social media, other people see it. So they're living in this bubble that I didn't have to grow up in. But I think we owe it to this next generation to show it's okay to be weird. Meaning,
Hmm.
embracing our fate, our destiny, things that make us quirky. When we think of the leaders and people we admire, whether or not it's people that actually lead or maybe pop stars, there's something weird about them. There's something unique. So we're actually
Hmm.
drawn to uniqueness in people. And in that vein, we also owe it to the next generation to show them how to connect. We've done such a
Hmm.
great job showing them how to disconnect. So I love your introduction when you talk about, connection is a big piece because we really owe it to the next generation to show them how to connect.
Hmm. And and what are what are some main ideas that you teach about connection? Because it is true. I mean, people are everywhere and nowhere at once these days, behind the
Mhm.
screen, whether people are engaging or not engaging on social media. That there's been studies to show the difference between depression and anxiety and isolation has to do with the people who are just watching versus the people who are actually interacting.
Mm.
So, what do you say to everyone about stepping towards connection?
It's, you do what's the first step, do what's easy. So I actually offer 52, it's like one challenge a week. I send out in emails for people, free tools. And I have people who do this with their teenagers or their college kids, where it starts out something simple, today go out and make sure you smile at 5 different people. This, next week it's say hello to 3 different individuals that you don't know, or whatever the challenge is for that week, because we're out of practice and it's so easy to put our heads down. The first thing is just practice. Start with the baby steps, especially if you're somebody who feels more comfortable not going out and saying, hello. I don't want to use the word introvert, but maybe if you are more introverted and it's uncomfortable, practice these skills. Yeah, as when I was traveling, I met this woman named Betty, 94 years old, and she was as sharp as a tack, steady on her feet, and of course, all of her friends were younger than her, and she had friends that were in their 30s and 40s, and she lives on this hill. This was in Arizona, and they call it hiking in Arizona. I call it walking. But anyway, people would hike past her house and she would go out and talk to them and meet them, to the point that now she has a group of 40 something year old men that sit at her table every Saturday morning to have coffee with Betty. And I thought, wow, that's the secret of staying young. We all think, oh, it's great to get older, but so sad because you lose all your friends and you're alone. Well, not if you live by like Betty and constantly have this practice of communicating with people and making friends. And this can't just start at 94. This has to be a practice that we start now at whatever age you are, so that by the time you do get to Betty's age, it's easy to make friends of people of all ages and you won't experience that feeling of isolation and loneliness.
Your story of Betty is making me think of Mrs. Sampson. I haven't thought about Mrs. Sampson in a long time. After college, lived in San Francisco with close friends, and we were in our early 20s, and we were on the third floor of the 3 floor flats. And on the first floor, there was Mrs. Sampson in her early 90s. And she befriended us to the point that we would regularly be going down and visiting her and talking with her, and she was so young in spirit.
Mm.
And these visits that we had regular visits with her, and it's been a long time, but she was a special person,
Wow.
right? And
What
it's
a
like
great memory.
yeah, I haven't thought about her in so long. And so these little steps, why is it so hard? Like, what are some of the most common reasons you're seeing that keep people from taking these steps towards connection?
Well, here's a good example. When I did travel and these were strangers, so when I'd reach out, I told them I might get some media coverage with this. I'm going to write a book. So I thought the objection was going to be if they objected, "Oh, thank you, but I'm a private person." That wasn't what the objection was I heard more than once. The objection I heard more than once was, "I don't know if I'm interesting enough for you." And
Mm,
man, I thought that was so sad because here I am, just a somebody that no one knows from Seattle asking to sit down and share a meal, and to think that your life or who you are or the conversation you can bring isn't interesting enough so that you don't even want to try, to me was
mhm,
sad, and I ended up meeting with those women who had those objections, and I can promise you that their stories and their lives and the conversations were just as rich as every other conversation. So I think what
mhm,
stops people is people think that they have nothing to offer, nothing to say, or the other person isn't going to be interested. And I say, well, instead of focusing on yourself, which is really easy to do, if you approach other people with curiosity about them, and you could think in your head, what are the things I want to know about someone else? You could pre-plan. And
mhm,
that really does take the focus of you because you're like trying to listen to their answers because you know what your follow-up questions are, and it makes it easier when you put the focus on the other
mhm.
person.
I think this is such an excellent example of comparison, also, which I know is something you also talk about. Whereas these women were seeing you on a 50 state tour, writing a book with some media following, and making an assumption, which is, well, gosh, if you're doing that and you must have like so much to you, and so much good stuff going on compared to how I am in my life. And you're already have said, like, you're the first to say, just because things look good on the outside, like, you have no idea what's going on in someone else's life.
You absolutely don't. And these women became my greatest teachers. It started out where I was trying to look for commonalities, and I found the differences made them more interesting. But what was really interesting, and this is how similar we all are, halfway through this project, around state 25, it felt like I was sitting down with one teacher, only the body and the voice changed. And the discussions just weave together so perfectly. It just reminded me of all this shared experience that we have, that when we sit down and talk with someone, um, just if we take out all the ideas ahead of time and sit down and are really curious about who they are, these
Mhm.
conversations start to flow.
And what you're accessing is this lived wisdom, right? Like, these
Mhm.
what is every year that we live, the experiences, the school of hard knocks, the unexpected, the also the triumphant and the jubilant, like, all of these go into our understanding of life and experience and emotion and relationship. And I find, like, one of the most amazing byproducts of my work as a therapist, coach, and podcast interviewers, I daily get to learn from other people's lived wisdom.
Oh, absolutely. You remind me of a woman I worked with who is a professional obstacle course racer.
Hmm.
And she said that historically, older athletes and, older for an obstacle race. I don't know what that is, 30s or something, but older older athletes who obstacle race tend to do better than younger athletes, she said. And it is part of that idea that they just know that when an obstacle is in front of them, they can handle it. And I
Mm,
think that's such a great analogy for life and the learned wisdom we get, the more we live life and learn from one another, that, when these things I've learned this in my own life. When obstacles keep coming through, I'm thinking, okay, that means now I think, okay, that means there must be another direction for me to take. As opposed to in my
mm,
20s, an obstacle came and, I throw everything up and what do I do now? But now it's kind of like, okay, there's an opportunity here. And
mm,
that's the way obstacles are now presenting. That being said, if
mhm.
anybody's listening, I don't need another obstacle right now.
You don't need another obstacle.
Yeah.
You're making me think of resilience, though, like, because it's all about practicing resilience, and the only way we get resilient is by going through difficult stuff, which is
Hmm.
why, as parents, even though we don't want our kids to suffer or to have some of the hardship that we might have had, and the tendency is to try to get in front of that. We also know that that robs them of certain experiences that will create opportunities for growth and resilience. That's a whole nother story. Lots of episodes on that. But what you're saying, it makes me think of something funny. With we have three young adults as well, and our youngest is doing a semester overseas, a month summer class, 4 units of overseas, and she's in a country that she doesn't speak the language. She was on her own trying to find this place, taking these different buses, and she was
Right.
had an appointment. It had to be somewhere, and she's trying to navigate the bus line and the signs, and she was going to be late, and nothing was working out. And the funny thing is, she told my wife and I, she said, yeah, mom, you always told us when we were growing up, you're fine. You're fine.
Mm.
And she's like, so I just told myself, I'm fine. I'm fine. And she goes, and I figured it out. And we just got hysterical because that message has some funny connotations in our family. But just how the how the messaging, like, what are our internal messages that we tell ourselves? Just like, oh, here's another obstacle. I'm
Mhm.
prepared for this, or life's full of obstacles, or here's another one. Let me try to figure it out. Versus, all the different versions of negative self talk and rolling up in fetal and thinking, I can't handle it. I can't do it. I can't go on. And it really comes from this inner voice and this inner cultivation of inner strength and a belief in our
Mhm.
ability to persevere.
And that also allows us to see opportunity, right? When we have that
Mhm.
mindset that, okay, here's an obstacle, you start looking around. And, when you start to do that as a habit, as opposed to going into that fetal position, you're able to see opportunity that you wouldn't have been able to see otherwise. And that's taken me years to learn. But now it's become a habit that's immediately
Mhm.
where my mind goes.
That's a good habit to have. A very good
It
habit to
is. It's a
have, and
lot better
yeah,
than the other.
yeah, yes. Well, okay, so that takes me to, well, 2 things actually,
Mhm,
because I know you have some life transitions, and some newness and some new life and new,
mhm.
experiences and opportunity, but before we go there, you're a cancer survivor,
Yes,
and so,
yes.
was that 2017?
It was. I was 47 years old,
Yes.
2017.
Okay, so adversity. Adversity,
Mhm.
surviving, and as you look back, or maybe then, like, how did that experience change you?
So, that kinda was the catalyst to, me getting to this point of because I didn't write my first book until I was 50. So, I started on this journey really. Cancer was part of it. Before that, in my 30s, I was told that I needed 2 hip replacements after not having hip problems my entire life. So that was the first
Wow.
big shock, and that was uh, almost more surprising than the cancer diagnosis just because of my age at the
And you
time and
got
the way.
2 and you got 2 hip and you had got 2 new hips?
I got 2 new hips and I have no
Wow.
restrictions other than running, which I wasn't running before. So, yes. And I'm
Mm,
basically a cyborg, actually. The more you talk to me, you're gonna be like, "Oh, that part was replaced, that part was replaced." But
mm,
so by the time I was diagnosed with this at 47, my kids were both in high school. Um, I did think, after I fell to the ground, after my doctor called, and I was home alone, and I remember falling to the ground crying. I thought, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? Because I do believe that when things happen, they happen because you're supposed to do something with it. And so that actually started my journey of being. I was already sharing quite a bit on social media, but being more uh, thoughtful when I shared, and more intentional, because I was so surprised how little I knew about breast cancer, the options I had, and the treatment options and everything involved. I knew very little about a disease that affects 1 in 6 women. And so I started sharing more, and I found that people responded and they were happy. They didn't know things that are supposedly common for breast cancer patients, decisions people have to make. And that really, it really is when my favorite quote came up, my favorite quote, which is comes in the form of a question, is, "If today were the last day of your life, would you be doing what you're doing now?" And from that diagnosis on, that's the way I've tried to live. And when I get
mm,
upset, that question pops into my mind.
mm. That's a really, it's a powerful question, and it's so hard for us, it seems, to live as we know that life is precious and finite. Like, we can intellectually get there, but
Mhm,
it's so hard to live it, and I like that question
mhm,
because we can ask ourselves a version of that every day or think about that every day to keep ourselves honest. And this goes back to the good life, great life, I think,
mhm,
conversation, which is having like the courage to be honest with ourselves of how we're really feeling about our life. And it's okay if we don't like the answer, because that's the fuel for the visioning and the digging of what is that's missing, or what do I want to do differently, or how do I want to spend my time, and to first be honest with ourselves, and then get honest with our close friends and loved ones and family and the people who are around us, so they can share in our perhaps quiet discontent and also our vision and dreams. What this is making me think about is us asking ourselves the hard
mhm,
questions and being honest with ourselves first, and not being afraid to admit, yeah, I want this, or I'm not getting this, or I see myself doing this, or I'm not satisfied with this. And first admitting that to ourselves, not just brushing it away
mhm,
and pretending it's good enough. It's like, this is the conversation that we talked about earlier between good and great. And
mhm.
once we can have this conversation with ourselves, it's sharing it with our partner, our close friends, like those around us, so they both can understand this truth, this honesty, um, and also see what the vision and the dream is, and be a part of that in some way. And I also know sometimes being a part of that is painful for for the loved one to hear some of this really honest stuff.
Yeah, it's not always easy to be honest with yourself, but that question, if today's the last day, am I doing what I would be doing now, has helped every time. Anytime I'm upset or anything, I think that, of course, the answer is no, because I definitely would want to raise my blood pressure if today was the last day upset about something. Usually that doesn't matter too much. A couple of other questions that I found have been helpful for me I got this from my speaking coach, Craig Valentine. At the end of every day, he asks himself, has he lived today in a way that his wife would marry him again? Will marry him, that day. So
Oh,
isn't that good for me?
that
So then
is,
I changed it for
yeah.
myself, uh, where I ask myself at the end of the day, did I live today in a way that my kids would be proud of me?
Mm, mm,
And if
yeah.
I didn't, and there are days where I'm like, they probably would have been embarrassed if they knew, the way I acted, or
Hmm.
maybe a choice I made. And I think, okay, I, let me do better because this is the benchmark I want to set for myself.
Yeah. Um, that makes me think about how we live in integrity or get off of our integrity, which we
Mhm.
often can get pulled off. And it's something that I think a lot about. It's something that I talk a lot about in my work. And it's something that that it's a guidepost for me. Like when I'm struggling or I'm not fully trusting that feeling in my body, which is telling me something, even though my brain
Mhm.
is telling me something different, I ask myself, like, does this align with my integrity? Like, is this aligned with who I am, my values, what I believe in? And in a very similar vein as what you're saying, and is, will I be proud of this? And will the others, people that know me, be proud of me for engaging in this or not engaging in this? And I'm wondering, how do you think about standing in integrity, especially as you have made all these shifts in your life?
I think it's important for health. And, being a cancer survivor, now being in my mid 50s and now being single. So, I don't necessarily have a caretaker to rely on. Health is really important to me. And so much of health, I think, is the stress we carry, what we carry inside our bodies, not just the food we take in or the exercise we do. And living in integrity feels so much better inside than not when you do something and you don't feel aligned and you're not living in integrity, it really wears down our systems. And
Hmm.
it wears down our systems physically, emotionally, and mentally. And that is, it's so important for me to live as long as I can and be as um, much of a contributor to society, to my kids, to my friends. That living in integrity, I think, is like number one up there with taking my vitamins every day.
Mm. Yeah, and it really creates much more. Well, that's when we live in alignment and there's just more flow and ease in our life, even if there's stressful stuff going on around us, because of course we're going to absorb stressful situations, but it's how we handle ourselves in those stressful situations, which literally does affect our cortisol, our health, our sleep. And it makes me think of something that I stumbled upon maybe in my late teenage years. The quote, "I never tell a lie because that way I never have to remember anything."
Mhm,
And I remember it's something like that. And when I remember practicing that, like, trying that on when I had different situations presented to me, and it might be easier to say one thing, which is not entirely
mhm,
true, versus I found so much more ease. I still live by this, the best that I can, is so much ease when we are just being honest and truthful with ourselves and others. Again, this is back to this authenticity and living in alignment and living in integrity.
mhm.
And there's so many things that pull us off it, but if we could stay on it as much as possible, there's just so much more ease.
And it's a lot easier to do when you've been able to get out of living someone else's story that they gave you and figure out what your
Flip
own
the
story
box. We're
is.
talking about flipping the
Right, yep,
box.
because the story you tell yourself changes everything about yourself. So,
Hmm.
finding out what your own story is, and it's not necessarily the story your parents gave you or your teachers gave you or society tells you, but your own story. And when you become the author
Hmm.
of your own story, it's so much easier to live in integrity because it just flows naturally.
Hmm. What have you found in all of your work, individuals and working with organizations and corporations? What are some of the main reasons that people are stuck, can't get to their story?
Because they don't even know what their story is. They've been literally from you think about when we're kids and we're, in grade school and somebody tells us to color something and we or draw something, make a design, and every kid's design looks totally different than each other. I mean, we have these great vast imaginations. As we get older, things start to look the same when we're told to do something because we've learned how to respond to what's expected of us. And so, you know, the problem people have is they know something's wrong. They know that they're not in alignment, and they've been giving everyone else a story that they don't know their own story. So sometimes it depends who I'm working with. I usually start by asking them, "What's your biggest personal challenge right now?" If they can't figure out what the box they're stuck in might be, and we go from there. And it's always, "What's the easiest thing you can do?" The first step, and it just starts to snowball. What did you like to do as a kid? Or we might even talk about who taught you how to ride your bike as a kid, just to get you back into that idea of who you were before you were living someone else's story.
Hmm. And it builds, as you say, it slowly builds when we get in touch with the things that used to be important to us, that often still are important to us. They've just gotten so buried. And and it's both freeing and scary in my experience of uncovering these aspects of ourselves when they start to really come out. And then the pull or the conflict of then our current life and the way we're living with now this new story, this new narrative, this new window into ourselves, and then some of these changes, small and bold, that we're then faced with.
It's not necessarily easy, especially if you have like a family, you have responsibilities. So it's not always easy to change things because sometimes when you change, and oftentimes when you change, people are growing and changing at different rates. And that can make it difficult. Um,
Hmm.
and I know we're not talking about codependency here, but that comes up when it's time
Hmm.
to, figure out what your story is. And I know for me, and the only reason I bring that up is because I've recently gotten divorced after 27 years, and I learned that I was a codependent, and that was keeping me also from really embracing who I am. And, I
Hmm.
became an attorney. Everything looks so good on paper. Right now, the things I do, I don't need a college degree for, but I'm making so much more of an impact now, and I'm
Hmm.
happier, and it just aligns with who I am. Um,
Hmm.
this is a great life now versus what it looked like and before it looked like a good life.
Hmm. And gosh, just I've told this at different times. Is the I remember being in college and struggling with some classes in particular, and I had undiagnosed dyslexia, and
Mm.
so I couldn't really make sense of why some of these classes were so hard for me. And I knew I was a psychology major, and that's the stuff that came easy. And I just remember being in my on my futon, and I think I was laying down to take another nap, which was after, like, a failed attempt at the library, and then it was like,
We
"I
must be
just better
about the
go."
same age.
Yeah,
I'm from the
we are,
futon
like,
generation too.
yes, mid-50s, I think we're exactly the same age, and I remember thinking, "Gosh, can I just find a job where I get paid to be myself?" And it was
Ooh.
such this weird, novel thought, but it kept coming to me. What could I do where I get paid to be myself? Which, I've come to realize what that is, which is like show up as I am, doing what comes naturally to me and what I'm passionate about. And as you're finding, and as I find, it's like when we have the privilege and the situations to do that, it's like we're just in flow. It's just in flow, and all of those other worries go away, and the other metrics slide away, and things get simpler. Now, of course, yes, we still need to pay for stuff, and we still need a place to live, and all of that stuff is still there. But at the core, if we are stepping into that authentic version of ourselves, giving back with what our talents are, and it could be anything,
Mm.
there's just so much more flow and alignment.
And I think parents could help out with this. It's so easy when we raise our kids, and teachers too, when we raise our kids, we're trying to get them up to par in the things that they don't do well in, right? We really emphasize, okay, we need tutoring in this area. We need to, work on this skill. And in all of that, we start to lose what our kids are really good at. And
Mhm.
we teach them this, and we learn this as adults in our job, our performance reviews, what we might need to work on to get to where, we're all in one column that we want to be in. And so we work on these things rather than focusing on what we're naturally good at. And this contributes
Yes,
to not knowing what our story is because we're so busy trying to get up to par, and not being in this situation where, man, I'm getting paid for being me. What I'm good
right,
at,
right.
I'm really good at.
Yes, yes, I totally agree, and I wanna even take it one step further. At our center, a specialty of ours is working with gifted and twice exceptional kids that are gifted and
Mm,
also neurodiverse. Um, and so over the years, we've worked with lots of very bright and talented mathematicians, scientists, pianists, name it.
mhm.
And what was really eye-opening in working with these clients in years past was them saying, you know, just because I'm good at it or great at it, everyone thinks I like it. And so
Oh.
it was this aha that we really as practitioners and with the value of our organization and supporting the holistic lives of these young people and people of all ages
Mm,
is it's what are you good at, which I agree with, and what do you like to do, and not making the
mm,
assumption that people, on the previous podcast, someone was talking about Andre Agassi and his memoir, and he didn't even like tennis. And
oh,
he was and it was all he knew. He was driven really hard by his dad, and he didn't have another option, and he was very perfectionist and competitive. But here's a guy who's one of the premier tennis players in the world in his day, and he didn't even like it. So it's just this thing for us to really think about is like we have our talents, and then we also have like what we like and what fills us up.
that I absolutely love that. When I practiced law, I was a decent litigator, but I also played I Will Survive on my radio on my way to work every day.
Oh gosh.
So that
Yeah. Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
I love that idea that it's just because you're good at it doesn't mean you
Mhm.
like it or you love it.
Well, I'm imagining your litigation as preparation for all of your public speaking, and, you don't have to play that song anymore.
No, I don't. In fact, I play Good Day now. A song called Good Day in the morning is my theme song. So that's how different my life is now.
Nice. So, when your book
Mhm,
is filled with all of the 50 women in the 50 states and the stories and the lessons, and what can you distill for us a few things to distill that will also leave people really interested in wanting to learn more about the lives and what I will say is the lives of it's also maybe not your intention but showing all these women from different places of all different states. Like, it's really about commonality, not differences.
Yes, it is. And these women range from the ages of 20s to 60s, different races, economic levels, education levels, political beliefs. And the thing that was really interesting to me is that there was one state that I landed in where I had the least welcoming experience when I landed in there, and this was Cleveland, Ohio. I happened to land right in a white supremacy rally, actually. And so I wasn't expecting it. And I was shaking by the time I got to my hotel room, traveling by myself. You know, as an Asian American woman, rented a car and I have bad sense of direction. So I was just picturing myself on the news, accidentally driving into this rally. So that was my most uncomfortable arrival in a city. But the next day, I met a woman there who was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, a beautiful blonde, white woman. And she and I hit it off like we were the best of friends. And the waitress even thought we were old college roommates that had reunited, and we were at this place for hours. And it told me, I can't judge a place by my first experience because this woman was born and raised there. And by the time I was leaving, I was saying, I cannot wait to come back to Cleveland, Ohio. And in fact, I'm going to speak at her alumni association in April.
Hmm.
And the woman, though, that looked most like me on paper, she was also another adoptee, an Asian woman. Um, she and I, we had a great conversation, but it was probably the most difficult interaction with one another. It didn't flow as naturally. And so that was interesting to me that someone who supposedly on paper matched with me, we didn't have that
Mm-hmm.
same energy and vibe naturally. So this whole process, going in and meeting these different people, I think what's interesting is if you approach someone with curiosity in every state, I got something that I wasn't expecting, and I got a lesson that I just happened to need to hear that I didn't even know I needed.
Hmm. Stay open to curiosity.
Mhm.
And
And there were women,
what a great, yeah.
yeah, there were women, like for in Indiana, I asked this woman based on where we were, had she ever sat down with an Asian person before? And she hadn't. And I said, "Well, I've never sat down with somebody from Indiana before," you know? So we were having these experiences together that were pretty magical.
Mm, yeah. Well, what a journey. What a journey. 50 states, 50 women, and
Mhm,
in a book now, your latest book,
mhm,
where, as you have flipped the box and
mhm,
changed the script,
mhm.
and as you shared before the show, moving
Yeah,
states, like,
yes.
what's next for you, and what are you excited about?
Oh, what's next for me? Well, now this Flip the Box, it's now a National Archive recognized holiday, March 6th, where people are encouraged to ask somebody to share a meal with them. Either it doesn't have to be a stranger, somebody they lost contact with, or even a family member. And from that, I've started to talk about flip the box for yourself, for your career, and for your community. And I've been speaking, become a professional speaker in this realm. So I'm excited about that, building my speaking career. And when I moved to Dallas, I'm creating 3-day retreats for women to flip the box. And basically, while other retreats take you away, this retreat, my intention is to bring you back home to yourself and your story. So I'm really excited about that and what's ahead.
You're growing and expanding.
I am, and because I'm a sharer, I'm bringing people with me.
You're going to share it with all of us.
I am.
Well,
I'm
Sherry,
actually
tell
sharing on
everyone.
YouTube
Yeah.
the move.
All right. Well, tell everyone where they can find everything that you're doing.
Sure. Well, the website is animperfectlyperfectlife.com and imperfectlyperfectlife.com. Otherwise, Google Shari Leid, SHARILEID. That's the same name as the YouTube channel. And we can connect. And if they connect online with me, I can send them those 52 challenges, one a week. On making friends. It's free. I don't share my email list and they can cancel at any time.
Well, thank you for thank you for sharing your journey and your authenticity, because you're modeling it for everyone. I've watched of your words, your speaking, it's you sharing your story, your talents, your expertise, and inspiring and motivating people that they can do the same. And I don't think there's anything truer, or, I mean, you are in your integrity. It is clear you are standing in your integrity and you are aligned, and the possibilities continue to open up for you.
Well, I'm so glad we're connected. I appreciate the work you're doing. I look forward to continuing um, our connection.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Shari.
Thank you.
Shari is certainly flipping the box in her life, living in integrity, re-scripting her story, and is now helping all of us think about and do the same in our own lives. So many good takeaways from this conversation, and here are 5. Number 1, flip your box. Shari's powerful metaphor reminds us that the very thing that once symbolized our disconnection can become the foundation of our deepest connection and purpose. Number 2, good isn't always great. A good life can keep us from a great one if we don't pause and ask ourselves if we're truly aligned with our purpose and calling. Number 3, connection takes courage. From 50 meals across 50 states to smiling at strangers, Shari shows us that building connection starts with small, brave acts of openness. Number 4, live your own story. Many of us are living lives scripted by others. What's the first step to this change? Start asking yourself what you really want and what you want to leave behind. Number 5, integrity is a health practice. Living in alignment isn't just good for your soul, it's good for your body, your relationships, and your resilience. Living in integrity allows your life to flow. Well, everyone, I hope this has made you think as much as it has me, thinking about the box that I have been in, the different boxes throughout my life, the scripts, the narratives, the programming, what I want to keep, what I want to shed, what I want to transform. Shari is inspiring us all to do the same. Please share this episode with anyone you think will benefit from hearing this message and conversation.